the silent arrival. The Nexus Ring hung in the darkness of space like a jewel carved from starlight. It was the largest diplomatic station in the known galaxy, home to the Grand Assembly where 300 species gathered to forge peace, trade agreements, and occasionally threaten each other with elaborate displays of military power. The station rotated slowly, its crystalline spires catching the light of distant stars, and within its halls walked beings of every imaginable shape and form. Commander Vexlar of the Crothan Empire stood at the observation deck, his 4 arms crossed over his armored chest. His species had ruled their sector for 10,000 cycles, and their reputation was built on strength. Every Crothan warrior wore combat armor even in diplomatic settings, and their weapons were works of art, designed to kill efficiently while looking magnificent. Vexlar watched the incoming shuttles with his triple-eyed gaze, counting the delegations as they arrived. The Zephyron came first, their insectoid forms clicking and chittering as they marched in perfect military formation. Each warrior carried plasma lances that hummed with barely contained energy. Next came the Voltari, floating in their gravity spheres, their crystalline bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. They needed no visible weapons because their bodies could generate electromagnetic pulses strong enough to shut down any technology or nervous system within 50 meters. Then came the Thoraxians, and Vexlar felt a familiar chill. These beings were nightmares given flesh, standing nearly 4 meters tall with exoskeletons harder than starship hulls. Their primary arms ended in biological weapons, acidic spray glands that could dissolve metal, and their secondary arms carried molecular disruptors. No species had ever successfully invaded a Thoraxian world. Most who tried never made it past orbital defenses. A smaller shuttle approached, unmarked except for a simple blue and green emblem. Vexlar accessed his data feed and his mandibles clicked in something like amusement. The humans had arrived. Ambassador Marcus Rivera stepped off the shuttle onto the polished floor of the docking bay. He was a man of average height by human standards, with dark hair graying at the temples and warm brown eyes that seemed to notice everything. He wore a simple black suit with no armor, no visible technology beyond a communication device on his wrist. Behind him came his security detail, for individuals in plain gray uniforms. There was Captain Elena Vasquez, a woman with sharp features and black hair pulled back in a tight bun. Beside her stood Sergeant James Wong, a broad-shouldered man with calm eyes that constantly scanned their surroundings. The third guard was Lieutenant Amara Osei, tall and lean with movements that suggested dancer-like grace. The fourth was Corporal Ivan Petrov, stocky and silent, his face expressionless as stone. They carried nothing. No guns, no blades, no visible armor. They walked with quiet confidence, but to the assembled alien delegations, they looked like prey walking into a den of predators. Vexlar descended from the observation deck to greet the human delegation personally. It was important to establish dominance early. He brought 20 of his finest warriors, each one a veteran of countless battles. Their armor gleamed, their weapons hummed with power, and their formation was designed to intimidate. Ambassador Rivera smiled as Vexlar approached. It was a genuine smile, warm and friendly, and somehow that made Vexlar more uncomfortable than any weapon could have. "Commander Vexlar," Rivera said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "It's an honor to meet you. Thank you for hosting this emergency session." Vexlar ignored the outstretched hand. He towered over the human, his 4 arms spreading wide in a display meant to show his physical superiority. "Ambassador Rivera, I see you have brought your security team. How interesting that they come unarmed to a station filled with the galaxy's most powerful warriors." Rivera's smile didn't falter. "We found that weapons often create unnecessary tensions. We prefer to build trust through dialogue rather than displays of force." One of Vexlar's officers, a younger warrior named Krell, stepped forward. His voice carried the arrogance of youth. "Trust? Ambassador, this galaxy respects only strength. Your people request protection for your colonies, yet you cannot even protect your own diplomats. How do you expect us to take you seriously?" Captain Vasquez shifted slightly. The movement was subtle, almost invisible, but Vexlar's combat-trained eyes caught it. Her weight had redistributed, her stance had changed, and suddenly she looked less like an escort and more like something coiled and ready. Her eyes met Krell's, and the young warrior actually took a step backward before he could stop himself. "We take security very seriously, officer," Vasquez said softly. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was something underneath it that made Vexlar's instincts scream danger. "We simply have a different approach than most species." The moment passed. Vasquez relaxed her stance, and Krell laughed nervously, trying to cover his involuntary retreat. But Vexlar had seen it, and he filed the information away for later analysis. The human delegation was escorted through the Nexus Ring's grand corridors. Other species watched them pass with various degrees of interest and contempt. The Zephyron clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. The Voltari's crystalline bodies pulsed with colors that indicated amusement. Even the normally stoic Thoraxians seemed to regard the humans with something approaching pity. In a private chamber overlooking the main assembly hall, 3 of the galaxy's most powerful leaders gathered. Vexlar represented the Crothan Empire. Beside him floated ethereal mind-weaver Silterra of the Voltari consciousness, her crystalline form shimmering with inner light. The third was Warprime Corax of the Thoraxian Dominion, his massive form barely fitting through the doorway. The humans request protection. Silterra's voice echoed directly in their minds, bypassing the need for sound. Yet they send diplomats with no weapons, no armor, no apparent defenses. Are they fools, or do they know something we do not? Corax's acidic spray glands flexed reflexively. Their military records show scattered defeats and minor victories. Nothing impressive. Their technology is crude. Their ships are slow. They have been part of the galactic community for barely 200 cycles. They are children playing at politics. Then we are agreed, Vexlar said. The human colonies in the disputed sectors will be redistributed. The Zephyron have been petitioning for those mineral-rich worlds for years. We will grant their request. The humans will be compensated with territory elsewhere, less valuable but adequate for their needs. And if they refuse? Silterra asked. Then we will remind them of their place, Corax replied. A demonstration of power. Nothing fatal, merely educational. The 3 leaders agreed and began making preparations. None of them noticed the small maintenance drone hovering near the ventilation shaft. None of them realized that in the human embassy section of the station, Captain Vasquez was listening to every word through a wireless receiver, her expression never changing as she recorded the entire conversation. That evening, the Grand Assembly Hall filled with delegates from across the galaxy. The chamber was a masterpiece of engineering, a vast dome that could hold 10,000 beings comfortably. Seats were arranged in ascending circles, with the most powerful species occupying the lower, more prominent positions. The humans had been assigned seats in the middle tier, neither honored nor insulted, merely acknowledged. Ambassador Rivera sat calmly, his 4 guards standing behind him. They had not moved for 3 hours, had not shifted their weight or showed any sign of fatigue. Other species guards rotated shifts, ate, drank and rested. The human guards simply stood and watched with eyes that missed nothing. The session began with standard protocols and minor disputes. Then Vexlar rose to address the assembly. His voice carried through the chamber with practiced authority. We gather today to discuss the situation in the disputed sectors known to humans as the Perseus colonies. These territories have become flashpoints for conflict. Multiple species have laid claim to resources there, and the humans, despite their brief presence in galactic affairs, have established settlements on 17 worlds in this region. Rivera listened calmly, his hands folded in his lap. The Grand Assembly has reviewed the situation, Vexlar continued, and we have reached a decision. The human colonies will be peacefully relocated. The Perseus sectors will be transferred to species better equipped to maintain order and develop those resources appropriately. The humans will be given equivalent territory in the Andera system, and they will have 90 cycles to complete the relocation. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some species voiced approval. Others seemed surprised by the boldness of the decision. The humans, everyone noted, remained perfectly still. Rivera's smile never wavered. And I am informing you with all due respect, that we will not be complying. The 17 worlds of the Perseus colonies are home to 43 million human beings. They have built lives there, raised families, created communities. We will not abandon them simply because the Assembly has decided we are too weak to matter. Behind Rivera, the 4 human guards hadn't moved. But something had changed. The air around them felt different, heavier somehow. Captain Vasquez's eyes tracked across the chamber, noting positions, calculating distances, identifying threats. Corax rose from his seat, his massive form dominating the space. Human, do you understand what you are inviting? Do you comprehend the consequences of defying this assembly? Rivera nodded slowly. I understand perfectly, Warprime. And I am prepared to discuss those consequences in detail. But first, I believe a demonstration might be educational for all of us. He turned to Captain Vasquez. Captain, I believe some of the delegates doubt our commitment to defending our people. Would you be willing to provide a small demonstration of human security protocols? Vasquez stepped forward. Her expression remained neutral, professional, almost bored. Of course, Ambassador. What did you have in mind? Before Rivera could answer, three things happened simultaneously. Krell, the young Crothan warrior, drew his plasma weapon in what he claimed later was simply a reflex. A Thraxian guard released a warning spray of acid that arced toward the human delegation. And a Voltari Mindweaver sent a psychic pulse designed to paralyze any being within 20 meters. The human guards moved, and the galaxy learned its first lesson about why they came unarmed. They didn't need weapons because they were weapons, and what happened in the next 7 seconds would echo across the stars for generations to come. The awakening. The plasma bolt from Krell's weapon cut through the air with lethal precision, its blue-white energy hot enough to vaporize flesh and bone. The Thraxian's acid spray followed a split second later, droplets of molecular-destroying liquid that could eat through starship hulls. The Voltari's psychic pulse expanded outward like an invisible wave, designed to shut down neural functions and leave victims helpless and screaming. The human guards moved. Lieutenant Amara Osei was closest to Krell. She didn't run from the plasma bolt. She moved toward it, her body twisting at an angle that seemed to defy physics. The bolt passed so close to her shoulder that it burned through her uniform, leaving a black scorch mark, but missing flesh by millimeters. Before Krell could adjust his aim, Osei closed the distance between them. Her hand struck his wrist with surgical precision, hitting a nerve cluster that made his four-fingered grip spasm open. The plasma weapon clattered to the floor. Krell was a trained Crothan warrior, veteran of 30 campaigns. He had 4 arms to her 2, and he outweighed her by 60 kilograms. He swung with his lower left arm, a blow that should have shattered her ribs. Osei wasn't there. She had dropped below his strike, and her legs swept out in a movement so fast it blurred. Krell's legs, built to support his massive frame, were suddenly no longer beneath him. He crashed to the ground with an impact that shook the floor. Before he could rise, Osei's knee pressed against his primary breathing tube. Not hard enough to crush but hard enough to make breathing difficult. Her hand rested lightly on his throat, and Krell suddenly understood that she knew exactly where to press to end his life. The realization froze him more effectively than any weapon. "Stay down," Osei said quietly. Her voice carried no anger, no triumph, just calm instruction. "Please." The Thraxian's acid spray was handled by Sergeant James Wong. Where Osei had moved with fluid grace, Wong moved with calculated efficiency. He grabbed a ceremonial shield from a nearby Zephron honor guard, the warrior too shocked to resist. The shield, designed purely for display, suddenly became a tool. Wong angled it so the acid spray hit the polished surface and deflected upward, splashing harmlessly against the chamber's reinforced ceiling. The Thraxian guard, a warrior named Thraxus, charged forward. His massive form should have been unstoppable. Wong planted the shield base against the floor and braced himself. When Thraxus hit the shield, expecting to crush both it and the human behind it, Wong used the Thraxian's own momentum against him. He twisted, redirecting the force, and Thraxus stumbled past him off balance. Wong moved in during that moment of vulnerability. His fist struck the joint where the Thraxian's exoskeleton plates connected at the knee. It was one of the few weak points in their otherwise impenetrable armor, a gap no larger than a finger width. The strike was perfect. Thraxus's leg buckled and the massive warrior crashed down. Wong pressed his advantage, applying pressure to another joint at the base of Thraxus's neck, a spot that controlled the acidic spray glands. The Thraxian froze, realizing that one wrong move would cause Wong to trigger an involuntary release that would spray acid in every direction, including onto Thraxus himself. "I'd recommend staying very still," Wong said calmly. "Your glands are extremely sensitive right now." The Voltari's psychic attack was perhaps the most interesting. Corporal Ivan Petrov stood directly in the path of the mental assault. The pulse hit him with enough force to drop 100 beings. Petrov's face twitched slightly, his jaw clenched, and then he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Mindweaver Silterra, who had unleashed the attack, suddenly felt something she had never experienced in 300 cycles of life. Fear. Touching Petrov's mind was like touching fire. Human consciousness was not organized like other species. It was chaotic, layered, protected by barriers that had evolved over millions of years on a world where mental discipline meant survival. Petrov walked forward through the psychic assault as if pushing through a strong wind. Each step was deliberate, measured. Silterra increased the power of her attack, pouring energy into the pulse until other species in the chamber were crying out in pain. Petrov kept walking. When he reached the Voltari delegation's position, he stopped 3 meters away. Close enough to make his point, far enough to not be overtly threatening. He looked at Silterra's crystalline form and spoke in a voice that somehow carried both gentleness and absolute certainty. You're in my head right now, so you can feel the truth of what I'm about to say. Push harder and I will push back. Human minds are not like yours. We evolved on a world where weakness meant death. Our thoughts are weapons too. You really don't want to find out what happens when we stop defending and start attacking. Silterra withdrew her psychic assault immediately. The relief in the chamber was palpable as the mental pressure vanished. But the Voltari Mindweaver's crystalline body was pulsing with colors that indicated deep distress. She had touched something in the human mind that terrified her, something old and hungry and absolutely relentless. Captain Elena Vasquez had moved to shield Ambassador Rivera, though the ambassador had never shown any sign of fear or concern. She stood with her back to him, her eyes tracking every threat in the chamber. When the immediate attacks had been neutralized by her team, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The entire sequence had lasted 7 seconds. 7 seconds in which 3 separate attacks had been launched and 3 trained warriors from 3 different species had been neutralized without the humans drawing a single weapon. Because they had no weapons to draw. They were the weapons. The Grand Assembly chamber was completely silent. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species stared at the scene before them. 3 elite warriors lay subdued or frozen by 4 human guards who looked barely winded. The humans' uniforms were slightly disheveled, and Osei had that burn mark on her shoulder, but otherwise they appeared ready for more. Ambassador Rivera stepped forward. His voice, when he spoke, carried across the chamber with quiet authority. I apologize for the disruption, honored delegates. I did not anticipate that request for a demonstration would be taken as an invitation to attack. However, since it has occurred, perhaps we can use this moment as an educational opportunity. He gestured to his security team. You see 4 humans standing here. You see no weapons, no armor, no technological enhancements. And yet they have just defended against attacks that would have killed most diplomatic security teams in this chamber. I imagine many of you are wondering how this is possible. Vexlar found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. What are you? Rivera's expression became thoughtful, almost sad. We are what our world made us, Commander. And I think it's time the galaxy understood exactly what that means. He touched his wrist communicator and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber. Images of Earth appeared, spinning slowly, showing a blue and green world that looked deceptively peaceful. This is our home, Rivera said. To most species, it appears to be a garden world. Pleasant, comfortable, ideal for life. But appearances can be deceiving. Earth is what xenobiologists classify as a Class 12 death world. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Death worlds were rare, planets where conditions were so hostile that only the most resilient species could evolve. Most civilizations emerged from Class 3 or 4 worlds at most. The holographic displays changed, showing Earth's predators. Lions bringing down prey 3 times their size. Sharks that had remained unchanged for millions of years because they were already perfect killing machines. Bears that could tear through metal. Snakes with venom that could drop a large animal in seconds. Spiders, scorpions, jellyfish, microscopic organisms too numerous to count, all of them deadly. Our ancestors evolved in an environment filled with predators, Rivera continued. They were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. They did not have claws or fangs or venom. They had something else. They had endurance. The display showed human hunters running across vast plains, following prey for hours, days sometimes. The animals they chased were faster, but humans never stopped. They tracked, they pursued, they simply refused to give up until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. Humans are persistence predators, Rivera explained. Our bodies are designed to move continuously. We can run for hours without stopping. We can go days without sleep when necessary. Our ancestors hunted by chasing animals until those animals literally died from exhaustion. And this ability, this relentless endurance, is built into every human at the genetic level. The display changed again, showing human anatomy. The delegates could see the complex muscular systems, the skeletal structure designed to absorb impacts and heal from damage, the cardiovascular system that could operate efficiently under extreme stress. Our bodies produce chemicals that enhance our capabilities during danger, Rivera said. Adrenaline increases our strength and speed. Endorphins block pain. Cortisol sharpens our focus. When a human faces a threat, our entire physiology shifts into what we call fight or flight mode. Except humans rarely choose flight. War Prime Korax spoke up, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been respect. You are saying your entire species evolved to be warriors? No, Rivera replied. We evolved to be survivors. But the skills required for survival on Earth translate very well to combat. Our history is filled with conflict because we competed with each other for resources, for territory, for ideological supremacy. We have been fighting for our entire existence not because we enjoy it, but because our world taught us that those who don't fight don't survive. The holographic displays now showed human history, wars spanning thousands of years. The delegates watched in growing horror as the numbers appeared, casualties from conflicts that had claimed millions of lives. The humans had been fighting each other with increasing sophistication for as long as they had records. We have studied warfare for 10,000 years, Rivera said quietly. We have developed hundreds of martial arts, each one designed to help unarmed humans defeat armed opponents or other predators. Every human child learns basic self-defense as part of their education. Not because we are violent by nature, but because our culture remembers what it took to survive on Earth. Mindweaver Silterra's voice echoed in the minds of everyone present. Your minds are different too. When I touched the human consciousness, I felt something I have never encountered. Your thoughts do not surrender. That's correct, Rivera acknowledged. Human psychology evolved to handle extreme stress. We experience fear like other species, but we have learned to function despite it. Our soldiers, our security personnel, they train to remain calm and effective even when facing death. This is not exceptional for humans. This is standard. He paused, letting the information sink in. Around the chamber, delegates were accessing their data systems, pulling up information on humanity that suddenly made terrifying sense. The records of conflicts where humans had won against superior numbers. The reports of human endurance that had seemed exaggerated. The psychological profiles that had been dismissed as errors in translation. It was all true. Vexlar felt his certainty crumbling. His people had been preparing to forcibly relocate 43 million of these beings. Beings who had evolved on a death world, who had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of combat, whose bodies and minds were designed for relentless survival. Why, he asked finally. Why do you come unarmed if you are so dangerous? Why present yourselves as weak? Rivera's expression softened. Because we understand what we are, Commander. We know our capacity for violence because we have spent most of our history experiencing it. We have fought wars that devastated entire continents. We have created weapons capable of destroying our own planet. And we learned something from all that death and destruction. He gestured to his security team. We learned that strength without restraint leads only to destruction. We learned that the truly powerful can choose peace. My guards come unarmed not because they are weak, but because they are so capable that they don't need weapons to defend me. It is a statement. We are choosing not to threaten you. But you could, Korax said. It was not a question. Yes, Rivera admitted. If you force us to defend our people, we will. The 43 million humans in the Perseus colonies are not soldiers. They are farmers, teachers, engineers, families. But if you attempt to forcibly remove them, they will resist. And their resistance will be more effective than you can imagine, because every human carries the legacy of Earth inside them. The chamber was silent again, but this time the silence carried a different quality. It was not confusion or contempt. It was realization, and beneath that, fear. Ambassador Rivera looked around at the assembled delegates. We came to this assembly seeking partners, not subjects. We requested this session not to beg for protection, but to establish mutual understanding. We will defend the Perseus colonies. We will not be relocated. But we are also willing to negotiate, to compromise, to find solutions that benefit everyone. He paused. We prefer peace. We strongly prefer it. Because we understand better than most species what the alternative costs. But do not mistake our preference for peace as inability to fight. That would be a dangerous miscalculation. Vexlar looked at the three warriors still subdued by the human guards. He thought about his plans to demonstrate power to these newcomers. He realized how close he had come to starting a conflict that might have destroyed his empire. Release them, he said quietly. The human guards stepped back immediately. They helped Krell to his feet, checked that Thraxus's glands were stable, and even nodded respectfully to Mindweaver Silterra as they returned to their positions behind Ambassador Rivera. The transition from combat effectiveness to diplomatic courtesy was seamless. The Grand Assembly must reconsider its decision regarding the Perseus colonies, Vexlar announced. His voice carried none of its earlier confidence. We will form a committee to address the disputed territories through negotiation rather than relocation. Ambassador Rivera, would humanity be willing to participate in such discussions? Rivera smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes. We would be honored, Commander. Over the following cycles, the galaxy's understanding of humanity underwent a fundamental transformation. Research teams studied Earth and its history, not with contempt but with something approaching awe. The humans had emerged from a world that should have broken them, and instead, it had forged them into something extraordinary. Security forces across the galaxy began studying human martial arts, trying to understand how beings without natural weapons could be so effective. Some species even requested human instructors to teach their own soldiers techniques for unarmed combat. But perhaps the most significant change was in how other species approached negotiations with humanity. There was a new respect, born not from fear alone but from understanding. The humans had chosen peace despite being capable of terrible violence. That choice made them trustworthy in ways that mere weakness never could. In the human embassy section of the Nexus Ring, Captain Vasquez stood at the observation window, looking out at the stars. Ambassador Rivera joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee, a human beverage that had become surprisingly popular among certain alien species. Do you think they truly understand now? Rivera asked, handing her one of the cups. Vasquez took a sip and considered the question. They understand that we're dangerous. Whether they understand why we choose not to be, that will take more time. The choice is everything, Rivera said quietly. Power means nothing without the wisdom to restrain it. And if they test us again? Vasquez asked. If someone decides to push anyway? Rivera's expression became firm. Then we remind them as gently as possible why we prefer peace. And if gentle reminders fail, we show them why Earth is classified as a death world. Vasquez nodded. Sir, permission to speak freely? Always, Captain. I'm proud to be here. Proud to represent humanity this way. Not as conquerors or victims, but as people who understand strength and choose compassion anyway. Rivera smiled. That's exactly what we are, Captain. And that's exactly what the galaxy needs to see. Below them, the Grand Assembly continued its work. Hundreds of species from across the stars debated policy, negotiated treaties, and built the framework for galactic civilization. And among them, the humans stood not as the strongest or the most advanced, but as something perhaps more important. They stood as proof that the most dangerous beings in the galaxy could also be the most peaceful, and that true strength lay not in the capacity for violence but in the wisdom to avoid it. The lesson had been learned, though not without cost. 3 warriors carried the memory of being defeated by unarmed opponents. 3 species had been humbled by beings they had dismissed as weak. And the entire galaxy had been reminded that evolution was not about becoming the biggest or the fastest. Sometimes, evolution created something far more terrifying. Survivors who refused to quit, who adapted to any challenge, who carried the legacy of a death world in their very DNA. Survivors who had learned that the ultimate victory was not in defeating enemies but in turning them into friends. The humans had arrived unarmed not because they were defenseless, but because they understood that the greatest weapon was the choice not to use one. And now, finally, the galaxy understood that too.